Our first question comes from Kevin. He's out of Nashville, who asks, and I read, I've been hearing about conjugate style training with max effort days and dynamic effort days. As a former athlete who's trying to keep my strength levels, but also stay explosive, is mixing heavy lifts with more dynamic movements a smart approach? Kevin, I love this question because it gets to the core of athletic training. Whether you are on a college roster or you are maybe 10 years removed from competition, let's start with this. Heavy strength work and dynamic movements they're not opposing ideas, they're complementary. Heavy lifting builds that foundation of force production. We're talking things like squats and deadlifts and bench press movements, right? All of those things, all of those movements where you're moving as much weight as you can safely for a few reps, right? That's your base. But here's the kicker. Just because you can produce a lot of force, it doesn't mean that you can express it quickly. And that's where dynamic effort work enters the picture, right? That's how you use dynamic effort. So think of it this way. Maximal strength is like having a massive engine under the hood. Dynamic effort is tuning that engine to respond instantly when you hit the gas pedal. That's why we mix them. So when I was, building maybe like, let's say an off-season training program, whether it's at Colorado or other institutions I was at, I used to see athletes hit personal records in the weight room, but sometimes lose some of their spring and quickness when they ended up hitting the court. That was my fault. I had built force, but hadn't spent enough time teaching them how to apply it explosively. So enter, maybe contrast training or dynamic effort days and plyometric work, and suddenly verticals and their first step quickness, all of that came back. So for a former athlete like yourself, Kevin, I'd suggest structuring it like this. Maybe 2 heavy days per week, 1 upper, 1 lower. Keep these around 3 to 5 sets, maybe 3 to 6 reps, 75 to maybe 90% of your max. Focus on your form and your, bar speed. Yes, they're grindy, sort of heavy day type of movements, but also include 2 dynamic days per week. So this is where you would pair sort of submaximal lifts, like 50 to 70%, with speed and power drills. So think of things like speed squats with bands or chains and med ball throws, broad jumps, maybe even Olympic lifts if you have a background in doing that, right? Or maybe even derivatives like hang power cleans, things like that. Now, a weekly split could look like on Monday, you might be doing heavy lower, trap bar deadlifts or RDLs or split squats. On Tuesday, maybe dynamic effort upper. So speed bench, right? Using bands and chains and mid ball chest passes and push-up variations, things like that. Maybe take Wednesday off, do some light recovery or some prowler pushes or sauna or cardio. But come Thursday, heavy upper. So overhead press, weighted pull-ups, rows, things like that. Now Friday, make it lower body dynamic, something where you're using some box jumps, some speed squats, some sled pushes, things that actually increase the velocity.